prior to this disaster happening.
Looking for a fast way to track what's moving online right now? Head over to Qnotables.com. It's a centralized index of notable clips, headlines, and references being shared across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. Qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay informed. All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas, and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here. From the Q Research boards. Trump to unveil Golden Fleet shipbuilding plan with Hegseth, and Navy Secretary Phelan. President Trump is holding a national security event in Palm Beach with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Navy Secretary John Phelan, where the White House is expected to outline a major Navy shipbuilding push. Reporting indicates the plan includes a new class of large surface combatants that Trump has described as battleships, tied to his broader Golden Fleet vision. The announcement comes as tensions rise in the Caribbean, and Venezuela remains a key focus for U.S. maritime enforcement. DHS raises self-deport incentive to $3,000 and relaunches CBP Home app. The Department of Homeland Security says it is increasing the incentive for undocumented migrants who voluntarily depart the United States to $3,000 plus travel assistance. DHS says the process runs through the CBP Home app and is intended to reduce the higher costs of forced removals. The department also warned that people who do not use the voluntary option may face arrest and deportation operations. CENTCOM launches Operation Hawkeye Strike targeting ISIS in Syria, U.S. Central Command says it launched Operation Hawkeye Strike against ISIS targets in Syria, describing it as a retaliatory operation after a recent attack on U.S. and partner forces. CENTCOM says the strikes began December 19th and targeted ISIS infrastructure. Officials have not released full damage assessments, but the operation signals a renewed emphasis on rapid response strikes tied to force protection in the region. Trump administration recalls nearly 30 career diplomats from ambassador posts. The Trump administration is recalling nearly 30 career diplomats from ambassadorial and senior embassy roles, part of a shift to align the diplomatic corps with the administration's priorities. The affected officials are expected to leave their posts in January and may return to other assignments in Washington. The move is drawing attention because the diplomats involved are career Foreign Service officers rather than political appointees. U.S. pauses leases for 5 offshore wind projects, citing national security concerns. The Trump administration has suspended leases tied to 5 major offshore wind projects on the East Coast, citing national security concerns identified by the Pentagon. The Interior Department says turbine interference could affect radar and defense systems, while critics argue the projects already went through extensive federal review. The pause could impact construction timelines, jobs, and regional power planning as electricity demand rises. Russian general killed in Moscow car bombing. Russian investigators say Lieutenant General Fanil Sarvarov was killed when a bomb exploded under his vehicle in Moscow. Authorities say they have opened a criminal case and are examining possible motives, including potential links to the war in Ukraine, though Kiev has not claimed responsibility. The killing adds to a pattern of high-profile attacks on Russian military figures over the past year. NORAD intercepts civilian aircraft near Mar-a-Lago restricted airspace. NORAD says an F-16 intercepted a civilian aircraft that entered a temporary flight restriction near Palm Beach, Florida, where President Trump was located. Officials say the fighter used a headbutt maneuver to get the pilot's attention and escorted the aircraft out of the restricted zone. Authorities continue to warn pilots to check flight restrictions carefully, especially around sensitive locations. Tennessee sues Roblox over child safety and alleged misrepresentations. Tennessee's Attorney General has filed a lawsuit against Roblox, alleging the company misled parents about safety protections and failed to adequately prevent predators from contacting children on the platform. The state says it is seeking accountability over the way Roblox markets and designs its features for minors. Roblox has faced scrutiny before, but this case puts the issue into a formal state enforcement action. University of Phoenix data breach impacts about 3.5 million people. Reporting indicates the University of Phoenix is dealing with a major data breach affecting roughly 3.5 million individuals. Cybersecurity reporting says the compromised information may include sensitive personal and financial data, and the incident has been linked in coverage to ransomware activity. Anyone who attended, worked for, or did business with the school should watch for official notification and consider identity protection steps. Bondi Beach attack aftermath drives renewed debate on security and free expression. In Australia, the aftermath of the Bondi Beach attack continues to drive public debate over security, community safety, and social tensions. Vigils have been held as officials investigate and communities mourn the victims. The policy fight now centers on what new enforcement steps may follow, how authorities handle extremist threats, and how public institutions balance safety measures with civil liberties concerns. Zelensky says elections cannot be held in Russian-occupied areas without security. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said elections cannot be held in Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, and that any future national vote would require basic security conditions. The remarks come amid continuing international discussion about possible ceasefire frameworks and what political steps could follow. Ukraine's legal restrictions during wartime also remain a key constraint on election timing and logistics. Protests in Lithuania over public broadcaster reforms and speech concerns. Large crowds have protested in Lithuania over proposed changes affecting the national public broadcaster, with demonstrators warning the reforms could weaken independence and chill speech. Local and European coverage described rallies outside Parliament and ongoing public pressure on lawmakers. The government says it is pursuing reforms, while critics argue the fast-tracked approach raises serious concerns about media freedom and public trust. Russia begins evacuating families of diplomats from Venezuela. Reporting tied to an Associated Press account says Russia has begun evacuating the families of its diplomats from Venezuela, described as a precaution amid rising tensions in the region. The move comes as the U.S. intensifies maritime enforcement actions connected to Venezuela-linked oil shipments and sanctions. Neither Washington nor Moscow has provided full public detail, but the evacuations signal heightened concern about escalation risks. Trump administration recalls nearly 30 diplomats in major reshuffle. Multiple outlets report the Trump administration is recalling nearly 30 career diplomats from ambassador and senior embassy roles as part of a broader realignment of U.S. diplomatic posture. Coverage indicates the move affects posts across several regions, with a heavy impact in parts of Africa. Officials have characterized the changes as reassignment and restructuring, while critics warn it could disrupt continuity in sensitive foreign relationships. George Conway files to run for Congress as a Democrat in New York. George Conway, a former conservative lawyer and prominent Trump critic, has filed paperwork to run for Congress as a Democrat in New York, according to multiple reports. The filing comes as Representative Jerry Nadler's seat is opening, drawing interest from several potential candidates. Conway has been a high-profile public figure in political commentary, and his entry would add national attention to the race. Petro comments spark backlash after talk of returning U.S. territory. Colombian President Gustavo Petro drew sharp reaction after remarks framed by multiple outlets as challenging U.S. historical territorial outcomes, including rhetoric about Texas and other regions. The comments appear linked to wider disputes over sovereignty, resources, and U.S. pressure campaigns in the hemisphere. The White House has not treated the remarks as a formal policy demand, but the exchange adds heat to an already tense regional climate. Georgia election claim circulates over missing signatures on tabulator records. A new wave of reporting and commentary claims some Fulton County tabulator tapes from the 2020 election lacked required poll worker signatures, raising disputes about process compliance and documentation. At this point, the most widely circulated versions rely on secondary reporting and political commentary rather than a single definitive statewide adjudication. The practical impact depends on what courts, auditors, or state investigators formally determine from original records and applicable certification rules. Peter Navarro says tariffs reshape global bargaining power. Former Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro stated that tariffs are not just revenue tools, but instruments to force better trade negotiations. Navarro argued tariffs discipline foreign governments and corporations while protecting U.S. industry. The comments reflect ongoing debate over the future of American trade policy. Tucker Carlson interviews Matt Gaetz on 2028 Race and Identity Politics. Congressman Matt Gaetz appeared on Tucker Carlson's program, criticizing Senator Ted Cruz's potential 2028 presidential ambitions and discussing identity politics and the role of advocacy groups. The interview signals early positioning ahead of the next presidential cycle. Comer seeks testimony in Minnesota fraud investigation House oversight. Chairman James Comer is seeking testimony from Minnesota officials as part of a probe into fraud and waste linked to state programs. The investigation centers on oversight failures during Governor Tim Walz's administration. Subpoenas are expected if cooperation is not forthcoming. DOJ closes long-standing migrant welfare eligibility loophole. The Justice Department says it has closed a loophole dating back to 1997 that allowed both legal and illegal migrants expanded access to taxpayer-funded benefits. Officials say the move restores congressional intent and tightens eligibility standards. Last group of kidnapped Nigerian students freed. Nigerian officials confirmed the release of the final group of students abducted earlier this year. Authorities say negotiations and security pressure led to their freedom. Kidnappings for ransom remain a major security challenge in parts of the country. Thailand and Cambodia urged to resolve border dispute bilaterally. National security officials say Thailand and Cambodia should resolve their dispute through direct bilateral talks. The statement follows renewed tensions along the border. Both governments have signaled interest in avoiding escalation. Epstein survivor says she is prepared to name names. An Epstein survivor says she plans to pressure the Justice Department by publicly identifying individuals tied to the trafficking network. The statement comes amid renewed scrutiny of Epstein-related files and calls for accountability. DOJ officials have not commented. Rewiring America funding draws scrutiny. Tax filings show climate group Rewiring America received more than $5 million in federal funding, while Stacey Abrams served as senior counsel. The disclosures are fueling renewed debate over political influence and nonprofit funding transparency. Republicans demand restitution for Rudy Giuliani. Republican lawmakers are calling for full restitution for Rudy Giuliani, citing what they describe as politically motivated legal actions. The demand follows recent court rulings affecting Giuliani's finances and professional standing. Democrats have pushed back on the characterization. FBI criticized for early inaction. In Epstein case, renewed reporting highlights claims that the FBI failed to act for years, despite early warnings about Jeffrey Epstein's criminal activity. The issue is fueling calls for accountability and congressional oversight into past investigative decisions. The FBI has declined to comment on specific allegations. Mullins, South Carolina defies mayor over nativity display. The city of Mullins, South Carolina kept a nativity scene in a market parking lot despite an order from the mayor to remove it. Supporters say the display reflects community values and religious freedom. The dispute has drawn state-level attention. Digital ID expansion sparks privacy warnings. Lawmakers and privacy advocates are warning that expanding digital identification systems could pose long-term risks to civil liberties. Supporters argue digital IDs improve efficiency and security. Critics say centralized systems could enable surveillance and abuse. U.S. Marshals cite progress in Memphis crime operations. The U.S. Marshal Service says its Memphis task force is showing measurable results in targeting violent offenders. Officials highlighted arrests and warrant executions as part of a broader crime reduction effort. Local leaders praised the coordination. Democrats struggle with low polling numbers. New polling shows Democratic support hovering near historic lows, sparking internal debate over messaging and leadership. Party strategists say voter confidence remains a challenge heading into the next election cycle. You can smell their panic from here. Looking for a fast way to track what's moving online right now? Head over to Qnotables.com. It's a centralized index of notable clips, headlines, and references being shared across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. Qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay informed. All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here. From the Q Research Boards. Parkland shooting survivor Donovan Meetire dies at 26. Multiple outlets report that Donovan Meetire, who survived the 2018 Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida, has died at age 26. Reports say he died by suicide after years of mental health struggles. Delaware High Court reinstates Elon Musk's Tesla pay package. Delaware's Supreme Court has reinstated Elon Musk's 2018 Tesla compensation package, valued at roughly $55 billion. The ruling reverses a court decision that had previously thrown the package out, putting the landmark executive pay fight back in Musk's favor. Point. Major San Francisco power outage hits about 130,000 customers. A large power outage in San Francisco left roughly 130,000 homes and businesses without electricity, disrupting traffic lights and transit. Reports also said autonomous ride services paused operations after vehicles became stuck at dark intersections during the outage. Coast Guard pursuing another tanker linked to Venezuela. Sanctions enforcement U.S. officials say the Coast Guard is pursuing a sanctioned oil tanker near Venezuela in what is described as another enforcement action tied to sanctions and illicit oil trafficking. The case has drawn international attention as Washington signals continued maritime pressure on sanctioned shipping networks. U.S. targets tanker Bella 1 amid stepped-up Venezuela oil actions. Reporting from multiple outlets identifies the tanker Bella 1 as a focus of U.S. action near Venezuela, with claims the ship has a sanctions history and has been tied to evasion networks. Coverage says this is part of a broader U.S. push targeting sanctioned oil flows in the region. France confirms plan for new nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. France says it will build a new, larger aircraft carrier to replace the Charles de Gaulle, with a target of being operational by 2038. French officials describe it as a major defense industrial project as Europe faces growing security pressures. Chile elects José Antonio Cast. President in runoff Chile has elected conservative José Antonio Cast president, with major outlets reporting he won the runoff with about 58% of the vote. Analysts say the result marks a sharp political shift and will test how far his agenda can move through a divided Congress. NORAD marks 70 years of tracking Santa. NORAD says it is continuing its long-running holiday tradition of tracking Santa's route, marking the 70th year of the program. The annual effort includes public updates through online dashboards and call centers. IDF chief warns Israel can strike on near and distant fronts. Israel's military chief said the IDF is prepared to strike threats wherever required, referencing both near and distant fronts as leadership shifts in the planning directorate. The remarks are being widely interpreted as a signal of readiness for broader regional contingencies. DOJ Office of Legal Counsel issues new opinion on means-tested public benefit definition. The Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel released a memo revisiting how federal law defines federal means-tested public benefit, a change that could affect eligibility rules in certain programs. Immigration policy groups and legal observers say the opinion reverses a late 1990s interpretation. CISA nominee Sean Planky confirmation remains stalled. Reporting says Sean Planky's nomination to lead CISA remains stuck in the Senate, leaving the agency without a Senate-confirmed director heading into 2026. Lawmakers and industry voices warn the delay comes during sustained pressure from major cyber threats. NORAD intercept details released for Palm Beach TFR violation. NORAD says fighters were scrambled to intercept an aircraft that violated temporary flight restrictions over Palm Beach, Florida, with officials reminding pilots to monitor emergency frequencies and comply with intercept procedures. The incident is part of a larger pattern of repeated TFR violations in the area. FBI document shows early warning about Jeffrey Epstein in 1996. Newly released records show Maria Farmer reported allegations involving Jeffrey Epstein to the FBI in 1996, including claims tied to sexual exploitation and illegal imagery. The disclosure is renewing scrutiny over why earlier action did not stop later abuse. Milwaukee judge convicted of obstruction in federal immigration-related case A. Milwaukee judge was found guilty of felony obstruction in a case alleging interference with federal immigration enforcement. The verdict follows a high-profile trial and has sparked debate over courtroom conduct and federal-state tensions on immigration enforcement. Tow truck driver acquitted after towing ICE vehicle during enforcement action. A Los Angeles jury acquitted tow truck driver Bobby Nunez on federal charges tied to towing a government vehicle during an immigration arrest operation. Defense attorneys argued he moved the vehicle briefly and it was quickly recovered, while prosecutors said it interfered with enforcement. Point. Australia. Wayne Swan criticizes booing of PM Albanese at vigil. Former Deputy Prime Minister Wayne Swan said he was not happy about Prime Minister Anthony Albanese being booed at a vigil amid heightened tensions after a recent terror attack. The incident has intensified national debate over security, social cohesion, and public anger spilling into public events. Actor James Ransone dies at 46. Actor James Ransone, known for roles in HBO's The Wire and the film It Chapter 2, has died at age 46, with the medical examiner listing suicide. Colleagues and fans are mourning his death as tributes spread across the entertainment community. Congress escalates pressure on DOJ over Epstein file redactions and omissions. New reporting says lawmakers are increasing pressure on the Justice Department over the handling of Epstein-related disclosures, including disputes over redactions and what was not released. DOJ leadership has pushed back publicly, saying the department is complying with legal requirements. San Francisco's $20,000 trash can prototype program resurfaces in renewed criticism. San Francisco's past pilot program for custom trash can prototypes, some reported near $20,000 per unit, continues to be cited as an example of high-cost city procurement. City reporting has noted prototypes were part of a design and testing effort before any mass production decisions. Report: Home Depot location in Los Angeles installs high-volume noise devices. A report says a Home Depot location in Los Angeles installed loud sound devices in its parking lot, drawing backlash from activists who argue it targets day laborers. The coverage frames the move as an escalation in efforts to discourage gathering and solicitation on private property. Minnesota fraud oversight debate intensifies amid broader investigations. Minnesota's ongoing fraud cases, some linked to state-administered programs, continue to drive political and oversight battles, with officials citing weaknesses in controls and enforcement. Local reporting notes multiple investigations over several years, and national figures are now amplifying the issue. DHS says it has located more than 129,000 unaccompanied children who were previously listed as missing, describing the effort as a joint push with HHS. Officials say the figures reflect case tracking outcomes. Black Vault publishes military psychological operations training document. After FOIA effort, the Black Vault reports it obtained and published a U.S. military training document tied to Joint Psychological Operations Task Force headquarters functions, following FOIA work. The site says the release provides a clearer look at how PSYOP headquarters training is structured. Point. Department of Justice Welfare. Following the new OLC memo, advocates and political commentators are debating how the revised interpretation could affect access to certain federal benefit programs. The dispute centers on which programs count as means-tested and how agencies apply the definition in practice. Reports revisit Poland-Ukraine historical dispute after alleged Volhynia gift story. A report claims Poland's president gave Ukraine's leader a book about the Volhynia massacre, a sensitive World War II-era issue in Polish-Ukrainian relations. Point. Ohio. Shoplifting suspect tries to shoot officer at point-blank range. Weapon malfunctions. Police body cam footage from Ohio shows a suspect accused of shoplifting pulling a gun in a store security room and attempting to fire at an officer at close range. Reports say the gun malfunctioned, and the suspect was subdued and charged with attempted murder and related offenses. Tina Peters' legal battle continues amid pardon-related headlines. Coverage says former Colorado election clerk Tina Peters remains tied up in state and federal legal processes, including appeals and disputes over release. Reports also note the legal limits of federal action when underlying convictions are in state court. U.S. Coast Guard pursuit near Venezuela draws international attention. Fresh reporting says U.S. efforts to board or intercept sanctioned tankers near Venezuela are escalating. U.S. officials argue the actions are focused on enforcing sanctions and stopping illicit oil trade routes. Providence mayoral race. Candidate Michael English faces renewed scrutiny over past conviction. Local reporting and court records show Providence mayoral candidate Michael English has a prior child molestation conviction from the late 1990s and later probation violation litigation. The issue is now central in the public debate over his candidacy and fitness for office. CISA leadership gap raises concern heading into 2026. Reporting says the continuing delay in confirming a CISA director is leaving long-term planning and coordination in limbo. Cybersecurity officials warn the leadership gap comes as major intrusions, and telecom vulnerabilities remain a national focus. Epstein document releases renew calls for accountability over past failures. New Epstein-related disclosures are fueling renewed demands for answers about who knew what and when inside federal law enforcement. Survivors and advocates argue earlier intervention could have prevented additional harm and are pressing for fuller transparency. France frames new carrier as strategic and industrial investment. French officials say the new carrier will strengthen maritime power and support domestic industry, with large-scale supply chain participation. Reporting also notes France plans to increase defense spending as geopolitical tensions rise. Chile markets react after election results. After Jose Antonio Cast's victory, coverage notes investor interest in how quickly security and economic reforms could move, given congressional constraints. Analysts expect early signals from the transition team to shape market expectations. San Francisco outage highlights infrastructure dependency for autonomous vehicles. Reporting from the San Francisco blackout shows autonomous systems can stall when core infrastructure fails, especially traffic controls and communications. City officials and companies say emergency procedures and coordination remain central as autonomy expands. Vigil backlash in Australia reflects broader security and social tension. The political fallout after the Vigil incident continues, with leaders urging unity while critics cite rising fear and anger. The episode is becoming a flashpoint in Australia's debate over public safety and community relations. North Carolina crash investigation continues after deaths of 7 investigators are examining weather, aircraft performance, and communications after the fatal Statesville airport crash that killed Greg Biffle and others. The NTSB says it will release preliminary findings after initial evidence review and lab work. Department of Justice and Congress clash over Epstein file compliance and redactions. New reporting says lawmakers are pursuing procedural tools to compel additional disclosures, while Department of Justice officials argue they are meeting statutory obligations. The fight is now moving into a more formal oversight phase, with public statements escalating. Milwaukee judge conviction adds pressure to immigration enforcement debate. The conviction of Judge Hannah Dugan is fueling renewed arguments over the boundaries between local judicial discretion and federal enforcement actions. Legal observers say appeals and disciplinary consequences are likely to follow. Looking for a fast way to track what's moving online right now? Head over to Qnotables.com. It's a centralized index of notable clips, headlines, and references being shared across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. Qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay. That's all for now. Stay alert, stay informed, and never hand your thinking over to anyone on a screen, including me. God bless you, God bless our troops, and God bless the United States of America. See you soon.